This is Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore. The headlines. A very special relationship. Presidents Trump and Macron hit it off. But while it's been friendly so far, the Iran nuclear deal is still up in the air.
If Iran threatens us in any way, they will pay a price like few countries have ever paid. Okay?
After the Toronto van attack and a dramatic arrest, 25-year-old Alex Minassian appears in court charged with 10 counts of murder.
I'm Kasia Madeira in London. Also in the programme, malaria is tearing through Malaysia, but in the forests of Borneo, could technology be the answer? And a look at how two former child militants and former enemies are now making peace in Indonesia.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London. This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Glad you could join us. It's 8 in the morning here in Singapore, 1 a.m. in London, and 8 in the evening in Washington, D.C., where President Trump received his first official state visitor with more than the usual handshakes and smiles. The two appeared, in their own words, to have a very special relationship. But in policy, perhaps, they were not so very close. President Macron had come to Washington to urge Mr. Trump to preserve the Iran deal. But Mr. Trump warned Iran of big problems if it restarts its nuclear program. From Washington, here's our North America editor, John Sopel.
The first state visit of the Trump era, and the French were given quite the welcome. These things are about pomp, they're about ceremony. And this one had one added ingredient: bromance. The two men held hands, they kissed, they hugged.
Finally, it's not...
And the biggest beast of the political jungle even engaged in a bit of interpersonal grooming with his younger colleague.
In fact, I'll get that little piece of dandruff off. That little piece. We have to make him perfect. He is perfect.
This most unlikely pairing have forged a close personal relationship, though on many policies they're miles apart. Just listen to Emmanuel Macron's introductory comments. It sounded like a repudiation of Trumpism.
C'est ensemble que nous pourrons résister à la montée des nationalismes.
He says the world must resist aggressive nationalism and work multilaterally.
It is really great to be with you, and you are a special friend.
Their biggest divide is over the Iran nuclear deal. President Macron says keep it. Donald Trump, for 3 years, has said it has to go.
It's insane, it's ridiculous, it should have never been made, but we will be talking about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the President of the French Republic.
But then, after lengthy talks that overran massively, the French president seemed to offer a new way through on Iran. Don't scrap the deal, which the Americans have to renew by May the 12th, build on it. In other words, a third way.
What we have to work on, obviously, with Iran and the different parties in the region, the P5 and our allies, is to find a fair deal where we can fix the overall situation. This is the only way to preserve sovereignty in the region and to build peace on the very long run.
And Donald Trump, significantly, didn't rule that out.
There is a chance, and nobody knows what I'm going to do on the 12th, although, Mr. President, you have a pretty good idea. But we'll see. But we'll see also if I do what some people expect, whether or not it will be possible to do a new deal with solid foundations.
At that, the French president seemed to nod in agreement. But from outside the White House cocoon, a stark warning from Tehran.
I am telling those in the White House that if they do not live up to their commitments, the Iranian government will firmly react. If anyone betrays the deal, they should know that they would face severe consequences.
And that brought an even more muscular response from the president.
If Iran threatens us in any way, they will pay a price like few countries have ever paid.
The news conference ended as the day began with more bonhomie, and President Macron making a determined effort to pull Donald Trump in a new political direction. John Thopel, BBC News, Washington.
Well, Iran wasn't the only subject that the two presidents discussed. Donald Trump also turned his attention to the upcoming summit between him and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He now describes the man that he used to call Rocket Man as very open and very honourable. President Trump said that he expects a meeting to happen soon and that it will benefit the whole world.
As far as North Korea is concerned, we are going to be having a meeting with Kim Jong-un, and that will be very soon. We have been told directly that they would like to have the meeting as soon as possible, and we think that's a great thing for the world. That's a great thing for North Korea and South Korea and Japan and France and everybody. So we're having very good discussions. Kim Jong-un he really has been very open, and I think very honorable from everything we're seeing.
President Trump there. Well, France's Emmanuel Macron is now back at the White House for a sumptuous banquet. Over 150 guests will be dining on a menu selected by the First Lady Melania Trump, including rack of lamb with jambalaya and a nectarine tart served with creme fraiche and ice cream. Well, early arrivals included the former US Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, the head of the IMF Christine Lagarde, and President Trump's daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner. Well, in another example of the thawing in relations between North and South Korea, North Korea has followed the South in suspending its propaganda broadcasts across the border, which separates the two countries. Seoul said it was halting the broadcasts on Monday as a goodwill gesture ahead of this Friday's meeting between the two countries' leaders. Officials in Pakistan say that at least 6 police officers have been killed and several injured in a suicide attack in the southwestern city of Quetta. The bomber blew himself up when a police van was travelling along a road near the airport. Police with assault rifles have been patrolling entry points to Boracay Island just days before a 6-month shutdown and clean-up of one of the Philippines' top tourist attractions. Officials also conducted exercises simulating clashes with protesters, terrorist attacks and a hostage incident, but there was no specific threat.
A man accused of deliberately driving a van into pedestrians in the Canadian city of Toronto has been charged with 10 counts of murder and 13 of attempted murder. Alec Minassian made his first appearance in court, and officials say the 25-year-old has no known links to any terror groups. Our correspondent Nick Bryant has the details.
On this street in Toronto this morning, the length of the police tape became another gruesome measure of how long this killing spree went on. It stretched for over half a mile. A suburban neighbourhood enjoying the warmth of the Canadian spring turned with manic suddenness into a place of death and horror. A white rental van became a guided weapon. This is how the killing came to an end, in a standoff with police. The driver urges the officer to shoot him. It looks like he's brandishing a gun. It was actually a mobile phone. But the police officer remains calm and moves in to take him alive. 25-year-old Alec Minassian has now been charged with 10 counts of murder, but this isn't being treated as a terrorist incident. While the motive isn't clear, this Facebook post just before the killings might be a clue. It notes the incel rebellion has already begun. That's shorthand for involuntary celibacy. He also praised an American who in 2014 killed 6 people in revenge against women who'd spurned him. A question for the police then, was this an attack against women?
Can you explain to us the number of men and the number of women who were in the victims, to give us a sense? I mean, looking at the list, the names seem to be predominantly females, at least on...
Yeah, that's fair to say, predominantly female.
You were down here.
I was right down over here.
Local resident Steve Quaratesi saw the van swerve to hit the first victim and then carry on driving.
And as I was coming up the street, I was literally running by bodies all over the sidewalk. Some of them were in pools of blood. People were doing CPR. People were injured. It was just pandemonium. Just everybody was going just crazy over here yesterday afternoon.
Here you can see the tyre marks where the rental van slalomed through various bollards and obstacles. And just further up, a sign of how fast that vehicle was travelling. This road line simply knocked out of the way. The victims of Canada's worst mass killing in decades are being memorialised at the roadside, and they're starting to be named. Anne-Marie D'Amico worked at the headquarters of an investment firm nearby.
The entire community of Toronto has shown strength and determination in the face of this tragedy. All Canadians stand united with Toronto today.
With the suspect now charged, the police won't discuss possible motives. They're also stressing their investigation still has weeks to run. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Toronto.
You're watching Newsday on the BBC, live from London and Singapore. Still to come on the program. The fight against malaria has stalled for the first time in a decade. We take a look at why and what's being done to beat the disease.
Also coming up on the program, while relations between North and South Korea seem to be warming up, some young South Koreans are less enthusiastic about possible reunification.
Watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And I'm Kasia Madeira in London. Our top stories. President Trump hosts his first official state visit, and ties with France look stronger than ever.
The suspect is alive, but his motive is unknown. The driver who killed 10 people in Toronto on Monday appears in court. Let's now take a look at some of the front pages from around the world. And firstly, we kick off with the international edition of the Japan Times. And Tokyo has won broad international support to address past abductions of its citizens by North Korea. The G7 nations have backed the bid, and South Korean leader Moon Jae-in says he will raise the issue with Pyongyang during the talks this coming Friday. Turning now the page to the Philippine Star, and it reports on how the country has apologized to Kuwait for aiding distressed Filipino workers in the Gulf state. Kuwait accused the Philippines of violation of diplomatic norms and infringing on its sovereignty. Turning now the page to the final newspaper, which is a China Daily, and Beijing Space Authority has announced it plans to build a manned scientific research outpost on the moon. No time frame has been given for when the outpost will be ready, as China continues to develop its ambitious space programs. From the papers, we shift now attention to trending and a bromance. Kasia is sparking discussions online.
Absolutely right, Rico. Our North America editor John Sopel noticed it. He's not the only one. Lots of people are talking about it online. This high-power bromance between President Trump and his French counterpart, President Macron. Well, they've made no secret of their mutual appreciation, but this rather bizarre moment just there, when Donald Trump brushed some dandruff off Emmanuel Macron's jacket, has raised some eyebrows. Mr. Trump told gathered reporters he was trying to make Mr. Macron even more perfect. Mr. Macron kind of smiled awkwardly, but seemed a little bemused.
Taiwan's fishing industry has found itself in hot water with EU regulators over illegal and unreported fishing with one of the biggest industries in the world. The country was put on a warning list in 2015 for not doing enough to stop illegal fishing and for failing to combat marine life depletion. And unless it changes its ways, Taiwan could soon face a ban on all fishing products to the EU. Our reporter Cindy Su, who is in Taipei, told me how close the island is to getting a red card.
Taiwan received the yellow card back in 2015 because the EU said that many of Taiwan's vessels practice illegal fishing. They fish in areas that they're not supposed to, breaking coastal nations and also regional fisheries management regulations. They also said that many of Taiwanese vessels actually don't report their catches or don't report them accurately. And on top of that, they say that many of the vessels are not regulated at all, that in fact Taiwan lacks an effective monitoring and control system for its large fleet of at least 1,200 distant sea vessels. So that's why the EU imposed the yellow card on Taiwan.
So what is the explanation now of the Taiwan government regarding the situation, Cindy?
Well, the Taiwanese Fisheries Agency has argued that it's made a lot of effort since receiving the yellow card and being put on the warning list, that it's amended laws to make them tougher for violators, and that it's actually imposed $1 million in fines for fishing companies that violate the laws. On top of that, it says it sent inspectors to 30 major ports around the world to inspect Taiwanese fishing vessels. But that might not be enough for the EU, and definitely not for environmental protection groups like Greenpeace, because they say that the key issue is that many Taiwanese-owned vessels are not even registered at all in Taiwan. They use a loophole by registering in small countries like Vanuatu that have no capacity to monitor them. So it remains to be seen whether the EU will hold Taiwan responsible for these unregistered Taiwanese-owned vessels.
So, Cindy, if the inevitable happens and Taiwan's fisheries exports are banned from the EU, could this have a major impact on the industry and bring wider implications to the economy?
Yes, definitely so. If the EU finds Taiwan's progress unsatisfactory, it will impose a red card on Taiwan, which could lead to sanctions on its exports, meaning that its exports will be banned from the EU. And that's a huge market. The EU is the biggest seafood importer in the world.
Cindy Su there speaking to Rico a little earlier. Now this week, the BBC is looking at stories about ways that people connect in an increasingly polarized world. The series is called Crossing Divides, and today we go to Indonesia, where at the end of the last century, hundreds of children took up arms in the East Molucca Islands. Now the conflict was divided along religious lines, pitting Christians against Muslims. Thousands were killed, 500,000 were displaced. This is the story of two child militants who used to be enemies, but who are now working together to try to keep this fragile peace.
Saya, Ronald Reagan, bekas Komandan Tentara Anak Pasukan Agas di kota Ambon.
Saya Iskandar Slamet, saya mantan pasukan jihad di Ambon.
The patchwork of Christian and Muslim communities on the island set about destroying each other as businesses and properties were put to the torch.
Yesus penolong hidupku, beri aku. Anggapan kita saat itu kita beranggap kalau ini adalah perang suci. Kita membela agama dan membela tempat tinggal kita.
Kita cukup sadis. Kalau saya sendiri masuk dengan dendam. Saya punya dendam yang cukup kuat. Saudara sepupu saya juga ketembak mati di tempat. Masih dengan curiga. Kita datang dengan curiga. Kita mulai dengan ngelirik-ngelirik aja, ngeliatinnya nggak berani senyum, nggak berani tegur kok.
Pas tahu dia Muslim dan dia pemimpin dari pasukan jihad mini, di situ kita hampir berantem dan hampir saling bunuh di situ.
Kita tulis amarahnya kita, emosinya kita, rasa bencinya kita, rasa dendamnya kita. Kemudian kita bakar semua rame-rame. Saya bilang saya paling benci sama orang Kristen. Karena mereka, sepupu saya mati ditembak depan saya. Tapi akhirnya kita bakar semua.
Kita bercerita kalau di orang Kristen itu isunya kayak gini. Di Islam juga menceritakan isunya kayak gini. Padahal, loh kok isunya sama. Nah kita juga sama-sama tidak tahu. Dari situlah kita mulai sadar, oh ternyata ini hanya sebatas komunikasi sebenarnya.
Onol yang bisa bikin kita semua akhirnya benar-benar nangis kita. Onol cuma bisa bangkit dan bilang, itu paling sayang kamu semua. Itulah sih. Lebur udah tuh. Mewek udah semua. Nangis. Itu paling sayang kamu semua. Karena kita bilang kamu semua kita saudara.
From enemies and now friends in Indonesia. Well, malaria is well known as one of the world's deadliest diseases, most commonly spread by mosquitoes. In Malaysia, they're battling a very particular strain. The parasite is moving at an alarming rate across the country due to human contact with monkeys. And in the forests of Borneo, they are using technology to combat this disease. Kimberly Fornisi from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine explained how technology is being used to fight malaria.
What we're really interested in doing is actually mapping the habitats where the mosquitoes and the monkeys are living. So we're using drone and satellite data to create really fine-scale maps of the different land types and habitats and monitor environmental changes. So this data, along with other data on malaria, allows us to really identify the places that have the highest risk.
How successful have you been?
I think we've learned a lot. We've come a long way towards understanding the epidemiology of this type of malaria. So we have a much better idea of who's at the highest risk and which places are most likely to have outbreaks of this type of malaria.
Have you been able to reduce the outbreaks of malaria in the Borneo area?
We have a much better idea now of how we can really target control strategies towards this. So we've learned, for example, that this type of malaria is primarily transmission occurs outdoors, early evening. So we know now that we should really target our control measures to insecticides and preventing people from being bitten outdoors around like 6 to 8 p.m. So yeah, we have made some progress and we have more work to do still.
From the Winter Olympics to K-pop concerts, the thorium relations between North and South Korea has led to speculation that the two countries may unite. But as young South Koreans would potentially bear the biggest burden of a possible reunification, some have been telling the BBC that they're simply too busy to contemplate a united Korea.
People actually realize that they're also human beings.
되게 수동적이고 약간 그런 이미지를 많이 떠올렸는데 김여정 방문할 때도 실제로 봤었는데 되게 카리스마 있고 당당한 모습이어서 북한은 어떤 사회일까 더 호기심을 갖게 한 것 같아요.
Through the Olympics, people actually realized that they're also human beings and we could be all friends.
I made this animation video about the contrast between a South Korean student's life and a North Korean student's life there. I put it on the internet. It shows how restrictive life in North Korea must be under an authoritarian state. There's not a lot of mainstream media focus on the people that are under that oppressive regime. I think every Korean kid kind of has like a distant relative that's been taken away to North Korea, so it's always been a close conflict.
We actually have no interest in reunification. We're just too busy trying to earn money, build our status in the social system. Reunification is right now pretty unrealistic. Two very homogenous nations that split off in like the 1950s, and it's been just developing like that. Well, it's like 25 million people there, so it's going to be half our population suddenly lumped onto our half. So it's obviously going to be very complicated and very difficult.
내 세대에서 그렇게 된다면 아무래도 우리나라 국력이라던가 경제력이라던가 이런 부분이 내가 이제 직장에 나가서 일을 하는 동안에 조금 힘들어지지 않을까라는 걱정을 좀 했던 것 같아요. 어려운 문제라고 생각을 하고요. 네, 그런 것 같아요.
The South Korean youth and what they think about a potential reunification with North Korea. Thanks for watching Newsday. I'm Rico Hizon in Singapore.
And I'm Kasia Madeira in London. And let's leave you with some images of three bear cubs even. These are little 3-month-old bear cubs. They were rescued in Bulgaria after some villagers found them simply roaming alone on a road in the country's southwest. They are doing well. They're in a sanctuary, but they are missing their mother. Officials are still looking out for her.